Welcome to Courtney on Health, heard on MalcolmPresents.com. As a matter of fact, all of her shows from day one, well, not the beginning of existence, but the beginning of her shows are heard on MalcolmPresents.com. Anyway, guys, welcome aboard. Maxine.
I guess that was a commercial from MalcolmPresents.com.
I always forget that I have to tell people where they're on.
Okay.
That's the old radio thing. You have to tell people what you're listening to, because people have a tendency of not remembering.
Right. Then it's also on the ManyShadesOfGreen.com.
On the many.
So there.
Poor
Courtney. She's like shaking her head. Okay. So let's get started.
It's all good.
Okay, Max, give us your introduction.
I'll give you the intro right here, right now. So hi again. Hi, Courtney. Hi, Malcolm. Hello. And welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast series about how to get through these lingering COVID times. I just shake my head. We'll just shake our heads with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Gravenese, registered dietitian and Master of Science with a Master of Science in Nutrition and Applied.
And now she is a Master of Science.
She's a master in the kitchen too.
At least in my world.
And you are definitely. Courtney is an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and beyond into the various sundry planets and universe, and will help guide you on a path to wellness and health. So here we go. I'm grateful for every day I'm still alive. Everything is still working. I attribute it to eating a lot of processed foods. I think it's the preservatives that keep me going. That, and I eat as much chocolate as I can get my hands on. Well, I didn't deliver it the way she would, but the quote is by the late, great Joan Rivers. She was clearly joking, but what food we eat is not really a joking matter. Many people eat food that is processed or ultra processed, especially fast food, which leads to weight gain, various medical conditions, and is really not part of a healthy diet. According to biochemist and dietitian Sean Wells, quote, sugar and fat don't occur together in nature. Food that scientists combine, they combine them in processed food, which override our systems and make us crave more. So I guess what they put together to make things taste better is not always the optimum thing, you know. So why are ultra processed food bad for us? What ingredients do you have to watch out for on food labels that list many ingredients you can hardly pronounce? Joan Rivers had the smarts to pick up that processed foods are bad, even when joking about it, except I think the chocolate part, because dark chocolate is really okay. Let's hear from Courtney about processed foods, ultra processed foods. How can we eliminate them from our diets, and what the definition is, and
everything in between.
And everything in between. So Courtney, let's start out with the definition. I can't speak today. It's been one of these days. Okay. I got to tell you, my brain, I feel like I have slower. Anyway, so these ultra processed foods, what are they?
So let's do sort of a quick crash course in sort of the whole category of everything from unprocessed all the way up to ultra pasteurized. Oh my gosh, where my head is going.
It's not just me.
It's not just you, see? Ultra processed foods. So just like you mentioned, Maxine, there's no question that unfortunately, given the way, not just Americans, but worldwide, the patterns that we see, we know that diets that contain mostly ultra processed foods contribute to, just like you said, obesity and various disease rates. So we're not looking for perfection, right? We're trying to give folks as many options as possible, but I feel like this is such a confusing topic. Maxine, you and I were going back and forth about this. People get super confused about, well, what's processed, what's unprocessed, what's minimally processed. So let's go through that super fast right now. So what we know, and by the way, this is a categorization of foods that is acknowledged by the World Health Organization. but not to date by the FDA or the USDA. And it's called the NOVA system of classifying processed foods. Still really helpful, I think, for people to know. Malcolm, where are you going? It's looking like you're taking off. There you go. You're back.
I'm not taking it, but actually, you could see me. The folks out there didn't see me rise because you're alone on the picture.
All right, there we go. Oh, well, thank you. I thought you were taking off.
No,
So
the
anyway,
star is there, no worries.
So unprocessed food, the first category is group 1, and those are unprocessed or minimally processed food. So if you think about it, it's very little has touched that food, if at all. So think about fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, grains, whole grains, literally the whole grain. So here I just have a couple of examples. This is bulgur. I have farro here. These are steel cut oats. So think it's either not been touched at all from nature, or it's had a little bit done to it to put it in a usable form. So that's group
I have a
1.
question with that.
Yeah.
If in those foods, they have preservatives in there,
Nope. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
that's
Don't-
not processed?
That's not unprocessed, minimally processed. So in order to fit that category, there cannot be anything added to it per se, but it can be dried, frozen. So for example, frozen peas that were picked in season and frozen that don't have added fats, sugars, salts to it do fit into the category of minimally processed food. So again, we're going to talk about tips and things to look for when we get to, how to avoid ultra processed foods.
Just one other interruption.
Yeah.
I forget what comedian it was, an older comedian says he doesn't eat anything he can't pronounce.
Well, actually, that could be a whole other show.
Doctors
yes,
say that
yes.
too.
Yes and no, because something sounds scary, like citric acid, for example, and meanwhile, that's just vitamin C. But again, topic for a different show. So minimally processed, unprocessed foods, they can be pasteurized. So for example, milk products, plain yogurt, not flavored yogurt, would fall underneath the category of that unprocessed, minimally processed food. So it's dedicated to that group. The next group, group 2, falls under processed culinary ingredients. So these would be foods that are added to other foods for a variety of different reasons. It might be to increase shelf life. It might be most often to contribute to flavor or to contribute texture. So I want you to think about the wide variety of oils, even butter, vinegars, even sugars, because remember the sugar, no matter what you think, we know the evils of sugar, too much sugar, but no matter what type of sugar you're thinking about, whether it be honey or agave or beet sugar, in its purest form, in that group 2, if nothing else has been added to it, it does fall underneath a processed culinary ingredient. They're typically not eaten alone, although I have known some people during my time who would actually take a teaspoon of sugar, but it happens.
Nope.
They're typically added to or part of a dish. So even things like flour, because remember, flour is got some processing done to it. We start with, let's just say, for example, if it's wheat flour, it starts as wheat, minimally processed down. Most people use flour as part of something else. They don't eat flour on its own. So it gets a little confusing once you leap off of that group as we go into group 3. Now, group 3 is a really large category, and that's what we considered processed foods. So look back at group 1 and group 2. So processed foods include some of what perhaps group 1 is, some of what group 2 is, to create this third category of processed foods. Doesn't necessarily mean, like, I know we're trained to think if it's processed, it's horrible, but the reality is this category of food comprises a decent amount of how we eat and what we eat. Most people don't eat. So for example, I do, but edamame, so soybeans, right, are a minimally processed unprocessed food. This is the way they occur in nature, right? Some people do eat them out of the pods like that, but more often, some people are eating them as part of tempeh or as tofu. So again, nobody would say because this is processed that it's an unhealthy food. So I want folks to try and think about not necessarily is it processed or not processed, but dig a little bit deeper, peel back some of those onion layers and sort of ask yourself, what's in there that might be making it an unhealthier option for processed foods. Generally, these foods are going to have 2 to 3 ingredients or more. Now, I want to talk about that for a second, because you guys might have heard people say if it's got, more than, and I'm just going to be arbitrary, more than 5 or 8 ingredients, put it back. Can't, it's overly processed and it's not, it's not good to eat. Well, that may or may not be true. I have here, it's actually, we're going to do a separate segment about this. It's a bread that I found. It's got 21 whole grains in it. So just by virtue of the fact that it contains so many different seeds and grains as part of the loaf, as part of the bread, it's going to have more than 8 ingredients. So don't always use that comment that if it has a ton of ingredients, it's going to be bad for you. You can't really follow that as law in terms of picking your foods. So in that processed category, that group 3, it could be things like peanut butter. So for example, even if it's fresh ground peanut butter, so nuts and seeds are obviously unprocessed. Peanut butter, as healthy as it is, if it's got added salt, which is not uncommon for peanut butters, okay, that's going to put it into the processed category. So you kind of need to put a little bit of a filter on and say, okay, it's processed, but it's not, it's not terrible in the world of, processed foods. Certain soups, some are worse than others. Some do contain some things you can never identify and have, are loaded with salt, but some are better than others. So, you got to look at the ingredient list. Cheeses, simply by the fact that you are adding some ingredients to that dairy product, it falls under the category of processed food. Freshly made bread is actually considered a processed food. Why? Not because the ingredients it includes are unhealthy, it's because there's yeast in there, or a sourdough starter. There's typically salt. There might be a little bit of molasses or a little bit of honey to give it a little bit of a sweetened flavor. So fresh baked bread, as odd as that sounds, would fall by this NOVA categorization of processed food. Canned fish, so tuna fish, canned sardines, some of these fishes that we've spoken about as being great options to perhaps get your omega-3s fall under that processed category. So at the last end of it would be those ultra processed foods. So these are foods from any combination of the previous 3 groups that we spoke about, plus they will have added sugars, added fats, added salts. They can include artificial ingredients, artificial flavorings, and preservatives. So you can see how there's a wide gap between maybe something that's considered processed and then ultra processed. Unfortunately, ultra processed foods in the United States comprise about 60% of our total calories. 60, that's huge. So if we can just start to pull back a little bit by moving away from these ultra processed foods, we will be in a far better place. Now, the reason why, by the way, the FDA and the USDA haven't embraced this NOVA classification is that they deem it to be confusing to the consumer. And you can see why, because there's a lot of, but what about this? And this one contains that. So consumers are confused enough, right? I feel like there's so much information being thrown their way that it's hard enough to get a handle on. I don't even know what's healthy, anymore. Most people have an idea, but I feel like with the wave of new products, trending products, not only for this year, but what we saw in 2021, people get really confused about what's considered, a healthful, diet if they're eating foods that they think are healthy, but really might end up being that ultra processed food category.
But to tell you the truth.
Courtney,
this-
does that, I'm sorry,
talking,
does that have to
I'm
do
getting confused.
also with, confusion with people eating, takeout foods that they have no idea? I mean, people started to cook more during the pandemic.
Definitely.
I'm wondering if, they were looking at labels, because if you're looking at cereal boxes, if you're looking at certain items, candies, cookies, all that stuff. But if you're now, hey, we had a cook, we're cooking, and did that have an impact on society at this point? Because hey, that sourdough starter was becoming a rare item, strangely enough. So
Yeah.
what were people concentrating on, and how did that, how does that affect it?
So you're right, Maxine. People, at least from the data that we see right now, at least in the United States, many people did experiment and cook more. I know a lot of people tried the Blue Apron, Purple Carrot, the whole category of meals delivered, like sort of semi-prepped, right? So you get the recipe and then the ingredients, and you kind of make it at home. But we unfortunately did see a large number of people who did, not going out to eat, but a lot of carry-in. So there's a wide variability in terms of how people adapted to this. So yeah, the silver lining was people did experiment a little bit more, the sourdough bread, but even just cooking more. It's like, you know what, they only wanted the grocery store once a week. They tried to work with what they had, which I think is amazing. I think, unfortunately, that if you were ordering doing grocery delivery, a lot of the ability to snoop at ingredients went out the window because it wasn't an option. You can of course do it online, but I don't know if you guys have ever done a online or a delivery. They're very convenient, but you'll be there all day if you're, snooping the ingredient list while you're trying to place this order. Most people are busy, they're juggling different stuff. That wasn't really an option. It's let me plop it in my basket and let me check it out, and I want it delivered to my front door. So I'm hopeful that this year, people, and I think people generally really try. They want to, they want to know that they're eating well. They do try to read the ingredients and labels. At least I can speak for, at least my social group, but then my client base. People really do try, but even still, it can be a little confusing because label laws can be a little confusing, even in the world of I know there's many people are trying to eat more plant-based, which I think is great. I think that experimenting with more plant-based foods is a good movement, certainly for the environment. But unfortunately, what we're seeing trending, and this is not just in the US, we've got some data coming out of the UK as well. Some of these options that are plant-based fall into that category of either highly processed, bordering on ultra processed foods, because again, we mentioned it might have started as a soybean, but there might be a lot of stuff that's happened to it to turn it into a dish. And that's part of the confusion, I think, that a lot of clients and a lot of people that I'm hearing about are experiencing. It's this confusion of, well, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be eating more plant-based. What do you mean that this is,
We're talking about the Impossible Burger in some form?
Yeah.
Because, there is, meat prevalence among, vegetarians, vegans, and, then meat eaters, but everyone was so hyped about it. And again, it's plant-based, so that's okay, in one respect, but what they are kind of putting into it is a whole other show, I think, because when I was reading up on this just to get some info, I was like shocked at what I saw, and would lead me to believe, like, I don't think I would touch it, but that's me. Other people might not look to see, why is this plant-based item, you bite down and it's like bleeding. It's like, how, you in your brain, you go, how is that possible? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and we will do, because I think it's fascinating. I think there's a lot, no pun intended, there's a lot of meat to that topic. So I think we really need to to
Right.
get into that. But if you talk about like trending foods and people migrating, I feel like, and by the way, I'm not beating up on plant-based foods. I'm totally not doing that. I think that anytime there's an opportunity for marketers to create something, we create this, this fervor and people jump towards it. So we do this a lot with, I remember when, there was, when salmon was the big thing. I mean, I was seeing salmon in absolutely everything, but it was so far and away from what the salmon fish actually looked like that I wonder, like, we somehow missed the mark. And unfortunately, I think we're missing the mark again when it comes to plant-based foods. So 80% of the increase in meat alternative consumption is attributed to, and this is probably 2020 data, so it's probably, it's a little over a year old now. I'm sure it's different now, but 80% of it is attributed to the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat consumption. 80%.
That's
So
a
it's big.
large number.
It's a large number. It's big business. So I think from an environmental perspective, again, that's why we need a whole nother show, about this. I think people, it's like, why are people, eating it? Well, there's a lot of reasons. People want to eat a little bit less meat. They want to, consume foods that are a little bit more environmentally less damaging to the environment. So from an ecologic perspective, I will say from an economic perspective, you could probably find other, it's not inexpensive. Let me just say that. So, I mean, if you're comparing it to wild salmon, it is, but if you're comparing it to perhaps some other options, it might not be. So lots of people are moving towards this, but I have to say the jury is still relatively out on whether you're getting what you think you're getting from a health perspective with regard to, and I'm talking specifically those, the meat, those two meat alternative options. I'm not suggesting that having grilled tofu or dishes where you include tempeh or more beans or more legumes. I'm not talking about that. I'm specifically talking about these I think it's a little unfair to categorize the Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger as ultra processed foods. The reality is they contain soy concentrate, they contain potato protein, they contain gums, they contain methyl cellulose. So keep in mind, these are the kinds of ingredients, back to your comment, Malcolm, these would typically be the ingredients that you would look at on almost any other food and say, ick, going back, but they're all fine. They're perfectly fine to consume. They really are. They're approved for consumption. But people get that, what am I eating? What do you mean methyl cellulose? Isn't that wood pulp? Like, so like.
I have a friend that's really a health nut. I mean, ultra. Now, anything that I eat, especially like I'm a meat eater and a chicken eater and even a fish eater or salmon. Number one, you have to check where the salmon is grown because of the mercury in the water. You have to check the chicken or beef. Are they being fed any? I know chicken and beef are fed different hormones to make them fatter or healthier. Where do you draw the edge over there? Where do you draw the line? I can go over and get natural meat or
Unprocessed.
I'm the word. I'm not unprocessed, but they're not being fed the hormones. And you always see these things there, especially beef. They're fed hormones to make them beefier or the meat tenderer.
Right. Well, first about just a couple of things. So the couple of things that, although we're very close to having a definition, a real definition of what natural will mean, up until now, that definition meant very little. Up until now, it's been basically a marketing technique to get the consumer to think that product is a little bit healthier. We talked a little bit about labels on one of our prior episodes. Same thing with regard to poultry specifically. You've never been allowed to administer hormones to chicken. That doesn't mean that if the chickens get sick, that they're not given antibiotics to get them healthy again. That's a whole nother thing. Cattle is a different story. So you're right. No, did you see I can see consumers saying, I'm done. I got so much to think about. This is just too confusing. I'm going to go back and I'm going to eat the way I want to eat. I can't figure it out. So it's a lot of sometimes, talk, the sort of science talk that gets stuck in the real message of what we really know inside, which is take a look at the food, really, how much has been done to your foods. And sometimes you can really tell. Nobody, listen, you buy a cake in a store, very few people look at that and say, well, it's got eggs and flour and it's got, people know that that's not a healthy food, right? It should be consumed every once in a while, infrequently. But a lot of other foods that are disguised as sort of healthy, those are the ones that make it a little bit trickier. So the best tried and true tips, which is why groceries we've talked about this, shopping the perimeter of grocery stores, where remember at the top, we said that group 1 is stuff that's had very little done to it. Now, some would argue that even apples, when they get to your market, have had stuff done to them. So, but anyway, shopping the perimeter, so your fresh fruits and vegetables. If you do eat meat and you do eat fish, know your fishmonger, know your poulterer, know where your products are coming from. And to your point, Malcolm, the country of origin is very important for many people. And now it should be noted in the casing where that food came from. So if you're not seeing it yet, you should be seeing it. So it's important to know exactly the source of the food. So, the ultra processed, to avoid the ultra processed foods, if you're moving away from the perimeter of that grocery store, you really want to, as best as you can, look past the advertising, look past the trends, and look at the ingredients. We've spoken about label rating before. What's the sodium content like? Look at that ingredient list. We know that foods have to be listed in order of greatest concentration to least concentration in the ingredients. So if you pick up something and it's something you eat every day, for example, and it's got salt or sugar listed as the first ingredient, that may be something that you may want to find an alternative to or eat less frequently.
Yeah, I almost want someone to sue the cereal and soda industry for child abuse, because I remember when my kids were younger and I go into the buying cereal, and of course all the fruity cereals or the sugary cereals are on our level for the kids, so they could reach out and get it. But you look at the labels, they're sugar, sugar, sugar. Same way as you buy the Coca-Cola or any of the soft drinks, not only Coke, Pepsi, you look at it as sugar, 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 and you see these kids eating it like crazy.
I agree with you. I think that there's some sort of insincerity in many other markets in addition to the cereal market. So we've spoken about, for example, acai bowls, which have been marketed as this great antioxidant like Super Bowl, right? So but we've discussed this. They're usually the first ingredient is sugar. Most people know that French fried potatoes are not exactly the healthiest food, but we know what they are, right? So we just need to encourage that people don't, instead of maybe having them at a fast food restaurant where there's been a lot done to those potatoes, first of all, to keep the shelf life. Secondly, to get that salt and fat flavor up so that you keep coming back for more. Instead of that, give people an option and say, okay, well, you know what? If you, for far less money, bought your own potatoes, put your oven really hot, chop these up, put a little salt and pepper, and sprayed it with a little bit of oil and put them in the oven, you'd have something very close. Is it going to be a McDonald's French fry? No. Will it be something closer and far healthier? Yes, and less expensive. So you're always putting that through there. The whole line of vegetarian burger alternatives. Read that ingredient list, and I'm not going to name any particular brand, but soy is an excellent plant-based protein option. It's a complete protein all on its own. You might need to learn to get a little creative and maybe making your own with the tofu and tempeh options, or do a bean-based, legume-based option which again, you got to get a little creative in the kitchen because it's not going to come together all on its own. I always tell people it's hard to if you've never done it before and you're not used to it. If you're trying to include more plant-based options, trying to do it on your own and come up with a tasty recipe that works for you and your family might take a little bit of time. Most people are comfortable making, for example, a grilled piece of fish or a piece of grilled chicken because it's easy. A little seasoning, a little salt and pepper, you throw it on the grill and you're done. Not so much sometimes if you're trying to create a hamburger out of things like lentils and beans. It needs a little bit more work and effort. You get there, but it just might, your learning curve might be a bit steep initially.
Hey, Courtney, quick question.
Yeah.
In terms of people who are vegans or vegetarians versus people who do eat meat, did the vegans consume less ultra processed food, I would assume, and the omnivores perhaps more? Just, I don't know. Is there any info on that? Does it matter? I don't know.
Well, I think honestly, it's an important message for all of us because, right, people have the right to eat the way they want to eat, right? So I think it's an important message that both omnivores, or whether you're a pescatarian, which is somebody who eats veg and then dairy, eggs, and fish, or if you're a vegan, right? So, or somewhere, combination in there. Based on some data that we do have, and again, it's relatively new, and this was one study, but it appears that, and I think this will change, I feel it will. Unfortunately, vegans have the highest percentage of the consumption of ultra processed foods as this NOVA system is defined. Now remember, it's not embraced by everybody. So I think that people went to eat more plant-based. They went to vegetarianism and to become a vegan. And unfortunately for ease, and I totally get it, went to the packaged prepared stuff and not necessarily to make it at home. This is at least what the data shows right now.
Wow, that's interesting.
Not everybody, but
wow, I would think that if you're a vegetarian or pescatarian, whatever, that you would take more time to make foods that are whole, as opposed to buying, pre-done food. I mean, that's interesting. I would never have thought that.
It is. I'll send you the article. And again, this is not an indictment of people who are vegan. It's really not. I'm hopeful that this is sort of an enlightenment of, listen, omnivores, vegans can be,
Hey, guys, can you hear me now?
Equally as confused as somebody who's a meat eater in terms of, oh gosh, I gotta watch my ultra processed food consumption.
But Courtney, did you hear me?
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I guess I muted myself, but anyway, hate to tell you, our time is up.
Oh no.
We could spend another 2-3 hours on this alone.
We'll have to have a part deux.
Definitely.
Deux and trois and quatre and cinq.
That's right.
Anyway, take us out, Max.
Okay, we're taking you out. Thanks, Courtney, for that info. We'll have to do more follow-up on that, and Malcolm. And thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, follow Courtney on her Facebook page, which is Courtney on Health, on Instagram at CLG Wellness, and visit her website, CourtneyGravenese.com. For more past shows, go to MalcolmPresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com. Courtney on Health, smart, sound nutrition, strong, safe fitness, and we'll catch you again next time.
See you next time.
And guys, for about 30 seconds towards the end, you'll see my lips moving, but you won't hear my voice. Something went out on the computer.
Okay.
Anyway, see you guys next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.